Picture this, two African powerhouses, Kenya and Sudan, locked in a hypothetical clash that could shake the continent to its core. Kenya's sleek high-tech military forged in the crucible of counter-terrorism, squaring off against Sudan's massive battle-hardened war machine tempered by decades of conflict. Who would come out on top in this epic showdown? Spoiler alert, the answer's not what you think. Grab your popcorn, folks. This is about to get explosive.
Shida ni hawa ni Masudanese nishaisemaga, hizi ni raya zile unajuaga inabilivi kidedi kuna mademu wako ndethe wanaingoja on the other side. Hakuna kitu waga inspirational kanyese.
It's like a high-stakes poker game where one side's bluffing with a royal flush and the other's got a fistful of wild cards. Who's got the winning hand? Stick around as we unpack the strengths, weaknesses, strategies and jaw-dropping possibilities of this military face-off. Trust me, you won't see the twist coming. Before we dive into the chaos, let's paint the picture. Imagine a simmering rivalry boiling over. Sudan's General Yasser al-Attah, a grizzled warlord with a penchant for bold moves, throws a verbal Molotov cocktail at Kenya's President William Ruto, daring him to bring the Kenyan Defense Forces into the ring. It's a gauntlet dropped in the sand, and we're here to see who picks it up. Big talk from a big man, but war's not one with words. It's one with steel, strategy, and stamina. So, what happens if these two nations go toe-to-toe? We're about to break it down, blow by blow, and figure out who's left standing when the dust settles. Let's meet the players. Kenya, the economic dynamo of East Africa, a nation with a military that's lean, mean, and packed with Western tech. Sudan, the hulking giant to the north, a country whose army is a sprawling colossus, built on sheer numbers and a legacy of relentless conflict. It's like pitting a cheetah against a rhinoceros, speed and agility versus raw, unstoppable power. But in war, it's not always the biggest beast that wins. Think of it as a blockbuster movie showdown. Kenya's the slick action hero with gadgets galore, while Sudan's the grizzled anti-hero who just keeps getting back up. Who's got the edge? Let's find out. First up, let's size up the arsenals. Kenya's military is a precision-crafted machine, modern, fast, and deadly. Sudan's? A juggernaut of brute force, big, tough, and built to brawl. But as any boxer knows, it's not just about the punch, it's how you land it. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty. Kenya's military is a force to reckon with, starting with their air power. Those F-5 Tiger jets? They're like the Ferraris of the sky, fast, agile, and armed with AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles that can lock onto a target faster than you can say game over. Add in AH-1 Cobra attack choppers, bristling with Hellfire missiles, and a fleet of drones that can loiter overhead, picking off enemies like a hawk snagging prey. Then there's their special forces. These guys are the real deal. Trained by the US Green Berets and Israel's elite Sayeret Matkal, they're masters of stealth ops, counter-terrorism, and guerrilla warfare. They've spent years hunting al-Shabaab in Somalia's jungles and slums. Think of them as Africa's answer to James Bond, minus the tuxedo. Let's get specific. Kenya's got MD-500 Defender helicopters, light, nimble birds that can dart in, unload a barrage of rockets, and vanish before the smoke clears. Their artillery, M109, Paladin howitzers, self-propelled beasts that can lob 155mm shells 18 miles with pinpoint accuracy. And their troops? Disciplined, professional, and drilled in some of the toughest conditions imaginable. Take their Somalia ops, Operation Linda Inchi in 2011. Kenya rolled into al-Shabaab's backyard, took key towns like Kismayo, and showed they can punch above their weight. It's like a welterweight stepping into the heavyweight ring and knocking out the champ. And don't forget the Western lifeline. The US and UK don't just train Kenya, they equip them. Satellite intel, encrypted comms, maybe even a few advisors on the ground. It's like having a tech billionaire bankrolling your startup. Kenya's got the edge in the gear game. But here's the catch. Kenya's playing with a smaller stack of chips. Their military budget's lean, about $1.1 billion a year, compared to Sudan's heftier purse. That means fewer toys and a smaller crew. They've got around 50,000 active troops, half of Sudan's headcount. Quality's great, but quantity, that's a pressure point. Numbers matter in a slugfest. Sudan could flood the field with bodies, forcing Kenya to stretch thin. And speaking of stretching, Kenya's supply lines? Brutal. Fighting north towards Sudan means crossing hundreds of miles of rugged terrain. Think dry plains, jagged hills, and spotty roads. Kenya's weakness lies in manpower and logistics. Picture this, a Kenyan convoy hauling ammo and fuel from Nairobi to the front lines near Garissa or Lodwar. Dust storms, breakdowns, ambushes, it's a logistical headache. And their population? 54 million versus Sudan's 47 million, sure, but mobilizing reserves takes time they might not have. It's like a sprinter running a marathon. Kenya's built for quick wins, but if Sudan turns this into a grind, those cracks could start to show. Now Sudan's military? It's a beast, a lumbering, unstoppable force. We're talking over 100,000 troops, hundreds of tanks, and enough artillery to turn a battlefield into a moonscape. Their ground game is pure power. Imagine a tidal wave of steel and grit crashing down. And their air force isn't just for show, MiG-29s, Russian-built Predators with air-to-air missiles, and Su-25 Frogfoots, ground attack jets that can shred anything in their path. Plus, they've got a knack for rallying militias. Think Janjaweed fighters from Darfur, turning civilians into a swarm of irregulars overnight. Let's break it down. Those T-72 tanks? Soviet classics, weighing 41 tons, with 125mm cannons that can punch through armor like a hot knife through butter. Their infantry? Seasoned from decades of civil war, Darfur, South Sudan, you name it. They fought insurgents, rebels, and each other, and they're still standing. And their artillery? BM-21 Grads, truck-mounted rocket systems that can fire 40 rockets in 20 seconds, blanketing an area the size of a football field in explosions. It's not subtle, but it gets the job done. Sudan's military is like a grizzly bear, slow to start, but once it's charging, good luck stopping it. Take the Second Sudanese Civil War. 22 years of fighting, millions displaced, and their army kept going. That's endurance you can't fake. They've got the manpower and the will to slug it out. But here's where Sudan trips over its own feet. Organization. Their military's a patchwork quilt. Rival factions, corrupt officers, and logistics that move at a snail's pace. Getting 100,000 troops fed, fueled, and fighting, that's a Herculean task they're not built for. It's like trying to run a marathon in a clown car. Sure, you've got the muscle, but if the wheels fall off, you're done. Their air force? Decent on paper, but sanctions have left their MiGs and Su-25s patchy, spare parts are scarce, and maintenance is a gamble. Sudan's weaknesses are logistics, unity, and internal drama. Sudan's military is a house divided, coups, power grabs, generals eyeing each other's throats. Look at 2021. The military ousted the civilian government, then started bickering among themselves. In war, that shaky chain of command could collapse like a house of cards. Now let's zoom out. Wars aren't just about bullets. They're about the boardroom deals and backroom alliances. Kenya and Sudan are playing on totally different chessboards, and the pawns they've got, night and day. Kenya's got a VIP list of allies that reads like a Western dream team. The US, UK, Israel, all pouring resources into their corner. Think real-time satellite feeds, encrypted comms, and training programs that turn soldiers into surgeons of war. It's like having a superpower as your personal coach. Kenya's the golden child of East Africa, stable, strategic, and a key player in the fight against terrorism. The US sees them as a bulwark against chaos. So if Sudan comes knocking, expect Uncle Sam to slip Kenya some extra firepower, drones, advisors, maybe even a carrier group off Mombasa to flex some muscle. But it's not just the West. The African Union loves Kenya. They're a peacekeeping powerhouse, with boots on the ground in Somalia and a voice that carries weight in Addis Ababa. Neighbors like Uganda and Tanzania, they'd likely back Kenya too, if only to keep Sudan's chaos from spilling over. Time to get tactical. How would these two slug it out? Kenya's got a sniper rifle, Sudan's swinging a sledgehammer. Let's see how they'd play their cards. Kenya's playbook? Speed, precision, and shock. They'd channel their inner Rommel, hit fast, hit hard, and keep Sudan reeling. Step 1, air superiority. Those F-5 Tigers would swarm Sudan's MiGs, while drones jam their radars and take out SAM sites. Step 2, decapitation strikes. Special forces infiltrate Sudan's rear, think Khartoum or Port Sudan, hitting command posts, fuel depots, and generals' HQs. Imagine Sudanese brass waking up to a Kenyan commando knife at their throats. Checkmate. Step 3, choke the beast. Airstrikes pound Sudan's supply lines, roads, bridges, rail hubs, turning their massive army into a starving giant. Step 4, stir the pot. Kenya could arm Sudanese rebels, Darfur groups, SPLMN, to spark chaos behind the lines. It's a page from the Gulf War. Air power cripples the enemy before the ground fight even starts. Kenya's betting on a knockout before Sudan can swing back. Sudan's approach? Overwhelm and endure. They'd throw everything at Kenya: tanks, troops, rockets, in a tidal wave of force. Step 1. Mass their army and steamroll south, aiming for Kenya's key hubs like Garissa or Nairobi. Step 2. Dig in. They'd entrench, forcing Kenya into a meat grinder. Think Stalingrad with sand. Step 3. Guerrilla chaos. Militias like the Janjaweed could infiltrate Kenya's borders, hitting soft targets, villages, farms, to stretch Kenyan defenses thin. Step 4. Outlast. Sudan's banking on Kenya running out of steam, ammo, fuel, morale before they do. It's a brutal, bloody gamble, but they've got the numbers to roll the dice. Think World War I trench warfare meets African insurgency. Sudan wants a long, messy fight where their sheer size wears Kenya down like water on stone. So what's the hinge this war swings on? Let's spotlight the X factors that could crown a victor. Air superiority is king, and Kenya's wearing the crown. Their F-5s, 20 strong, Western-trained pilots, top-tier missiles, could dominate Sudan's dozen MiG-29s, which are hobbled by spotty upkeep. Add drones and Cobras, and Kenya's sky game is untouchable. Sudan's Achilles heel, logistics. Moving 100,000 troops across deserts and swamps is a nightmare. Fuel runs dry, food spoils, trucks die. Kenya's leaner force can pivot. Sudan's a lumbering giant tripping over its own feet. Think Napoleon's march on Russia. Supply lines stretch too far, and winter, or in this case, airstrikes, finishes the job. Kenya could cut Sudan's throat without firing a shot on the ground. And the geopolitical trump card, Kenya's allies. Western intel could hand them Sudan's playbook, troop movements, weak spots, the works. Sudan's flying blind, guessing where the next punch lands. Judgment Day. Who would win this war? Kenya's got tech, speed, and allies. Sudan's got muscle, grit, and numbers. It's a clash of titans. My money's on Kenya. Air power, precision, and intel tip the scales. They could end it quick. Sudan's a tank rolling downhill, but if Kenya cuts the brakes, it's over. Long war? Sudan might grind it out, but that's a big if. Real talk. War's a loser's game. Both would pay a price no crown's worth. And hey, this is all hypothetical. Let's root for peace, because in the real world, war's got no winners, only survivors.